We met during a volunteer cleanup at the riverfront. It was one of those spring weekends when the air smelled like wet earth and the promise of summer. I was hauling rusted metal out of the weeds, sweating through a faded college t-shirt, when she walked up with a pair of work gloves tucked in her back pocket and a smile that made everything else go blurry. Anna wasn't loud. She wasn't flashy. She was precise, the kind of person who didn't speak unless she had something worth saying. She asked if I'd hand her the rake I wasn't using. I said, "Only if you tell me your name." She rolled her eyes but smiled again. By the end of the day, we were eating lukewarm burritos on the hood of my car, talking about travel, music, and how the city always felt one streetlight away from collapse. She said she liked that about it. A year later, we were married. Things moved fast, but nothing ever felt rushed. We were in sync. She was the kind of partner who remembered the names of my coworkers before I did, who made coffee exactly how I liked it, who bought boots a size too big when I said mine were fine, just in case your pride breaks before the soul does. We bought a 3-bedroom house in a quiet part of town, something with space to grow into. I worked in residential construction, managing crews for mid-scale development. Anna worked in finance at a mid-size firm, the kind of job that made her fluent in spreadsheets and schedules. Her calm balanced my chaos. I liked hammering out walls, she liked penciling in the plans. We had 2 kids. Mason first, loud, thoughtful, obsessed with bugs and building things. Then Evie, a storm in pigtails, who insisted on picking her own clothes by the time she turned 3. They filled the house with more noise and joy than I ever thought I could survive, and somehow, we adjusted. A few years in, we bought a second property, a small 2-story house just a block from ours. Anna said it was smart to build passive income. We rented it to a young couple, Nate and Lindsay, who just moved into town with their toddler and a dog that barked at falling leaves. They were kind. Friendly. Always paid on time. Sometimes we bumped into them walking to the park. Anna started bringing over mail that got misdelivered, then extra muffins, then quick chats that turned into longer ones. It didn't bother me. We were landlords, sure, but neighbors first. And Anna was warm like that, the kind of person people confided in without meaning to. The years passed cleanly. Work, family, routines. We made time for each other, kept the spark alive in the little ways, handwritten notes, late-night glasses of wine, occasional weekends without the kids. Our life was solid. Not flashy, not fragile. Just lived in and real. Weekdays followed a rhythm. I'd be out the door first, usually before the sun was all the way up. Construction starts early, you beat the heat, beat the traffic, beat the city waking up. Anna would still be in her robe, half asleep, packing lunches and pouring cereal with one hand while checking work emails with the other. She always kissed me goodbye, even if her eyes were barely open. By the time I got home, the house had already lived a full day. Backpacks dumped by the door, socks abandoned near the couch, the dog barking at nothing from the backyard. Anna kept the place running without making it feel like a machine. There was always a little chaos, she liked things to have texture, not just order. Dinner was sacred. No phones. No rushing. Just the 4 of us around the table, asking real questions, laughing about whatever story Mason was animatedly telling. Evie would interrupt a dozen times, but Anna was patient. She had that softness you can't fake, that steady voice that brought things back when they drifted too far. We didn't go out much, but we didn't feel like we needed to. Our joy came from the quiet stuff. Folding laundry while watching a crime doc. Reading side by side on Sunday mornings. Tackling projects, refinishing an old dresser, painting the spare room, building a sandbox in the backyard. She was handy in her own way, stubborn about getting things right, but not afraid to ask for help. About once a month, we had a date night, sometimes dressed up, sometimes just burgers and a movie. Nate and Lindsay, our tenants, would sometimes watch the kids. They were easy to trust. Lindsay was a teacher on maternity leave, and Nate worked part-time from home. We liked them. Normal people. New in town, grateful for a decent landlord, always polite. Anna and Lindsay got closer over time. It made sense, both moms, both sharp. They'd take the kids to the park together, swap recipes, talk books. I'd come home and find them chatting on the porch, laughing over something that didn't need explaining. One Saturday, we invited them over for dinner. Nothing fancy, grilled chicken, corn on the cob, a few cold beers. It was easy, natural. Nate had a dry sense of humor, and Lindsay had that teacher tone that made the kids instantly obey. It was nice. We talked about maybe taking a weekend trip together with the kids, renting a cabin or doing a beach run. I remember thinking how lucky we were. To have friends next door. To have a partner who could balance work and family and still make space for connection. To be in a home we built, surrounded by people we trusted. There was nothing loud about our life. No drama. No cracks. Everything looked exactly the way it should. And if you'd asked me then, even pressed me, I would have said with total certainty. We were solid. It surprised me how quickly they became part of our circle. At first, Nate and Lindsay were just tenants, names on a lease, friendly hellos at the mailbox, waves through the windshield. But within a few months, they were the kind of people we called when we needed an extra folding chair, or someone to watch the dog for the weekend. It wasn't forced. It happened the way real friendships do, slowly, then all at once. Their daughter, Ivy, was a year younger than Mason, and the two became nearly inseparable. Evie took a little longer to warm up, she always did, but by the end of that summer, she was calling Lindsay Miss L and begging to help bake cookies at their place. Anna loved having them nearby. She said it reminded her of growing up, when neighbors were like family and nobody locked their doors. She and Lindsay got especially close, texting all the time, trading books, borrowing each other's mixers, that kind of thing. They started going on walks after dinner with the kids or meeting up at the farmer's market on Saturdays. I liked it, honestly. Anna lit up more. She laughed harder when Lindsay was around, and she seemed more at ease in those moments than I'd seen her in a while. She didn't talk about work stress as much. Didn't stay up late poring over spreadsheets. It was like something had shifted, subtly, but in a good way. Sometimes Nate and I would hang out in the garage or backyard, just talking shop. He wasn't a manual guy, didn't know the difference between a hammer drill and a mallet, but he listened. Asked questions. Helped hold lumber when I rebuilt the fence between our lots. We didn't have deep talks, but he was easy to be around. One night, after a few beers, he said, "You two really have it figured out. Me and Linz, we're still learning how to balance everything." I remember smiling at that. Not because we were perfect, far from it, but because it felt good to be seen that way. Like maybe, from the outside, we looked like a version of what we were trying to be. As autumn came, we settled into a comfortable rhythm. Weekdays were packed with school and work. Weekends were neighborhood dinners, shared errands, pumpkin patches, backyard movie nights. Anna and Lindsay planned a Halloween block party together, decorations, games, matching costumes for the kids. They went all in. It was the first time our street had seen that kind of energy in years. I didn't think twice about any of it. Anna would spend the occasional hour or two at their place, helping Lindsay with Ivy or just catching up. I'd be with the kids, cleaning up or cooking dinner. Sometimes she came back with leftovers or a borrowed dish, a new recipe she wanted to try. Other times, she'd walk in like nothing had changed, pick up right where she left off. If anything, I was grateful. Grateful she had a friend. Grateful we had people nearby who cared. Grateful that our world felt full and lived in, not lonely or isolated like so many couples we knew. That winter was one of the calmest I can remember. We were in a good rhythm, the kind where days passed without much friction, just familiar movement from one thing to the next. School drop-offs, grocery runs, Saturday pancakes. Anna handled most of the kid logistics like always, and I picked up the house stuff when I could. We weren't perfect, but we were steady, and that counted for a lot. Nate and Lindsay had settled in well next door. Their daughter, Ivy, was now over at our place almost every other day, and sometimes we barely noticed. She blended in easily, another plate at the table, another backpack by the front door. Anna didn't mind, if anything, she liked having the house feel fuller. More energy, more laughter. That December, we invited them to help decorate our Christmas tree. It wasn't planned. They were walking by with Ivy, and Anna asked if they wanted to stop in. One hot chocolate turned into 3 hours of ornaments, cookies, and the kids tearing through the living room with glitter stuck to their hair. Anna and Lindsay made cinnamon rolls from scratch that night. I remember the whole house smelled like brown sugar and vanilla. Nate and I sat on the floor with the kids and tried to untangle lights that somehow knotted themselves in storage. It was the kind of evening that didn't feel big while it was happening, just simple, warm, and good. They stayed late. Ivy fell asleep in a pile of coats on the armchair. Nate carried her home with one hand, balancing a plate of leftovers in the other. Anna stood in the doorway watching them walk back to their place, arms crossed over her sweater, eyes soft. "That was nice," she said. I nodded. It really was. The rest of the month stayed busy but uncomplicated. Lindsay and Anna took the kids caroling with the PTA one weekend. Nate and I rebuilt a gate post that had started to lean after a windstorm. We talked about maybe getting the families together for a cabin trip in spring, something close, with a fire pit and enough space for the kids to run wild. We rang in the new year at home. Just us. Mason stayed up for the countdown, barely. Evie passed out on the couch before 9. Anna and I clinked glasses in the kitchen while the neighbors shot off sparklers in the street. January came in quietly. School resumed. Anna's work picked up again. I was bidding out spring construction jobs and trying to get ahead of the schedule. Our days were full, but not rushed. We still found time for each other, quick coffees before the kids woke up, evening walks when the weather held, her hand brushing mine as we passed in the hallway. There was no tension. No space between us. If anything, our life felt fuller than ever. The kids were growing fast, the house felt lived in and warm, and our connection with Nate and Lindsay had become one of those rare neighbor relationships you don't think twice about, trusted, comfortable, part of the fabric. Everything felt in place. Everything made sense. February came with its usual rhythm, cold mornings, early darkness, school flyers stacking up on the kitchen counter. Anna and I had settled into a kind of winter autopilot. She was planning a birthday party for Evie, something small with cupcakes and a few of her classmates. I was juggling a few job sites with unpredictable weather delays and trying not to bring work stress home. Everything on the surface looked the same. Dinner around the table. Weekend chores. Occasional movie nights when we could keep our eyes open long enough. Anna was still on top of it all, managing schedules, checking homework, refilling the snack bins like clockwork. Then there was one night. She came home later than usual from the grocery store. Only by maybe 30 minutes. I wasn't watching the clock, but I'd texted her around 7:15 to ask if we needed anything else, no reply. When she finally walked through the door, arms full of bags, she looked a little flustered. "Sorry," she said, dropping her keys in the bowl. "I ran into someone and lost track of time." I didn't think much of it until later, when I went to put something in the trash and noticed an unfamiliar receipt peeking out, a local cafe. One I knew well. Not next to the grocery store. Not anywhere near her usual route. I didn't say anything right away. It could have been a quick detour, a stop for a snack, or a spontaneous catch-up with someone. But still, she hadn't mentioned it. That was the first time I felt a little pause. Not a red flag. Not a full stop. Just a pause. The next morning, I made us both coffee and casually said, "Hey, who'd you run into last night? Anna didn't look up from her phone. Oh, just someone from work. You don't know her. Then she smiled at me, like the answer didn't need any more detail, and asked if I could drop Mason off that day because she had an early meeting. It was normal. It was smooth. But something about how quickly the answer came, how ready it felt, stuck with me for a few hours. Still, I let it go. Marriage isn't about interrogating every strange moment. We were busy. We had lives. One random receipt wasn't reason enough to start doubting anything. I mentioned it to no one. Later that week, Anna and Lindsay took the kids to a story time event at the library. I stayed back to finish paperwork. When they returned, the kids were buzzing about a puppet show and cookies, and Anna was beaming. I remember watching her unload Evie's coat and laugh as she tried to explain the plot of the story. That smile, the real one, where her eyes crinkle and she bites her bottom lip, it was still there. So I put the cafe thing out of my mind. Or at least, I tried to. Because everything else was still good. Anna still held my hand when we walked to the mailbox. She still leaned into me on the couch. She still whispered, "Thanks," when I brought her tea while she worked late on her laptop. It all felt normal. Except now, for the first time, I was quietly watching the details a little more closely than before. It didn't happen all at once. Just little things, like patterns slightly offbeat. If I hadn't already tucked that cafe receipt away in the back of my mind, I probably wouldn't have noticed anything at all. One morning, Anna left earlier than usual. She said she had to meet a client across town before heading into the office. She asked me to handle lunches for the kids and made sure I had everything I needed for school drop-off. It wasn't unusual. Her job had picked up lately with a couple of new accounts, and I knew she'd been stepping into more leadership. Still, around 9:45, I got a text from Lindsay asking if Anna had left something at our house. Just a scarf, no big deal. I told her she must have, she'd rushed out that morning. Lindsay said she'd bring it over later. I thought about it afterward. Anna never mentioned she'd be seeing Lindsay that day. And if she wasn't, how would Lindsay have even seen the scarf? Again, nothing concrete. Just, loose ends that didn't quite knot the way they usually did. A few days later, I came home a little early from work. The house was quiet. Anna was in the kitchen, headphones in, on her laptop. She jumped slightly when I walked in, not a big reaction, just enough to notice. "Didn't hear you come in," she said, closing the screen. She smiled. Kissed me. Asked about my day. Everything was normal. Except that laptop didn't reopen for the rest of the night. Usually, she worked straight through from dinner to bedtime cleanup. But that night she left it on the counter, untouched. I brushed it off. Told myself I was overanalyzing. One weird look here, one closed screen there, it didn't mean anything. And if I started treating it like it did, I'd just be feeding something that didn't exist. The following weekend, we hosted a game night. Just us, Nate and Lindsay, and a couple from down the street. It was easy, fun, familiar. Anna and Lindsay teamed up for charades and laughed so hard they cried during a round about movie titles. There was nothing about the way Anna acted that night that felt off. She was warm. Relaxed. She leaned into me when I poured her another glass of wine. She kept glancing over at me during the game and mouthing answers I couldn't guess in time. But afterward, when we were cleaning up, I noticed she'd changed clothes sometime during the night. Just a small thing, swapped her sweater for a different one. I didn't know when she'd done it. I asked, casually. Was the first one too warm? She paused, only for a second. Spilled wine on it, she said, dropping a handful of napkins in the trash. There was no wine stain in the laundry. It was such a small thing. Not worth asking again. But these tiny moments were starting to layer. Not enough to accuse. Not enough to confront. But enough that I was starting to pay more attention to things I used to take for granted. Her bag was packed differently these days. Her routine was a little looser. Her answers came just a half beat too quickly. And I found myself waiting for something. Not a discovery. Just clarity. Because it was starting to feel like there was something there, just outside of reach, hiding in the ordinary. By March, I knew every corner of our house too well. I noticed when a drawer stayed cracked open. When a jacket that normally lived on the coat rack was suddenly stuffed in the laundry room. When Anna stopped leaving her phone face up on the nightstand. Again, none of it was concrete. But together, the details started to feel like static, buzzing in the background of our days. Anna's energy changed too. She was still kind. Still patient with the kids. Still woke up early to pack lunches and kiss me goodbye before work. But it felt like she was conserving something. Like her presence had a boundary I couldn't cross, even though we were standing in the same rooms, talking about the same errands and planning the same school projects. She still laughed at my jokes. Still touched my arm when she passed me in the kitchen. But her eyes drifted more. Her focus slipped. Her stories from work had fewer details. Her laughter ended sooner. I stopped trying to convince myself I was imagining it. But I also wasn't ready to believe what it might mean. One night, I woke up at 3 a.m. and noticed the other side of the bed was empty. I waited a minute, thinking maybe she'd gone to the bathroom or to check on Evie, who still had the occasional bad dream. But after 5 minutes, I got up. I found her in the living room, curled on the couch under a throw blanket, her phone in her hand, dim light glowing across her face. She didn't hear me come in. She flinched slightly when I said her name. "You okay?" I asked. "Couldn't sleep," she said quickly. "Didn't want to wake you." I nodded, even though her voice was too composed, too rehearsed. She didn't sound like someone who'd just been sitting in silence. She sounded like someone who was prepared for a question. "You've been restless lately," I said. She shrugged. "Just a lot on my mind. Anything I can help with?" She smiled softly. "You're already doing more than enough." That answer, kind, final, unreachable, stuck with me. It was the sort of thing someone says when they don't want to be asked again. That weekend, she said she needed time to herself. A Saturday morning for a reset, she called it. She took her laptop and a book and said she was going to a cafe to do some reading and catch up on a few emails. She came home 4 hours later, dropped a half-finished coffee in the sink, and kissed me on the cheek. "How was it?" I asked. "Quiet," she said. "Exactly what I needed." I nodded. But I kept thinking about how her shirt smelled faintly of cologne I didn't recognize. Not mine. Not perfume. Something unfamiliar. Still, I didn't say a word. Because part of me was still trying to protect what we had, or maybe just the version of it I wanted to believe in. The house was clean. The kids were happy. We still said, "I love you," before bed. But something between us had changed, not loud, not violent. Just, quiet. Like a conversation that had already ended, and neither of us wanted to admit we were still pretending to hear each other. And somewhere in that silence, I started bracing for what might come next. It was a Saturday afternoon when it happened. I was fixing a leak in the kitchen faucet, nothing major, just one of those slow, nagging drips that never seems urgent until it ruins the cabinet base. I had my tools out, flashlight in my mouth, and a bucket half full of water when I realized I'd left a specialty wrench at the other house, the rental. I'd been using the shed there for overflow tools, stuff I didn't need every day. It was easier than cluttering our own garage. Nate and Lindsay were fine with it, they joked it made me part landlord, part tool hoarder. Anna had gone out with the kids. Said she was taking them to the indoor trampoline park, then grabbing groceries on the way back. I figured I had a window of time, so I wiped my hands, grabbed my keys, and headed out. The walk to the rental was only 5 minutes, a straight shot around the corner. I didn't text or call ahead, didn't think I needed to. It was our property, and the shed was always unlocked. When I got there, I noticed their car was gone. That made sense. I figured they were out too. But as I stepped into the backyard, something felt strange. I heard music, low, not loud enough to be alarming, but it was coming from inside. That's when I saw that the sliding back door was slightly open. I froze. There was no reason for it to be. I thought maybe one of them had left in a rush. I stepped closer, about to knock and announce myself, when I heard voices. 3 of them. I couldn't make out every word. But I recognized the tones. Relaxed. Familiar. Laughing. Then I heard her. Anna. I leaned forward slightly, barely moving the curtain at the edge of the glass. And what I saw didn't make sense. She was sitting on the couch, barefoot, legs tucked under her, with Nate beside her. Lindsay was on the other side. Anna's head was resting against Nate's shoulder. Lindsay had her hand on Anna's knee. They weren't talking like tenants and a landlord. They weren't sitting like friends. They looked like a unit. Like something shared. Like this was a scene they'd played out before, comfortably. And then Nate leaned over and kissed Anna on the cheek, slow, deliberate, while Lindsay reached for her hand. Anna didn't pull away. She smiled. Like she belonged there. I backed away from the door before they saw me. My heart was pounding, not in panic, in clarity. In the space of 5 seconds, everything fell into place. The hours she couldn't account for. The missing details. The small, repeated lies disguised as normal life. And the connection to them, our trusted tenants, our friends, the people we let into every part of our world. I walked home in silence. I didn't confront her when she got back. She brought in groceries like nothing had changed. Told me the kids were in the backyard and that dinner could wait until later. I just nodded. Because what I was going to do next would take more than words. It would take fire. By Monday, the plan was already in motion. I didn't speak a word of what I'd seen. Not to Anna. Not to the kids. Not even to myself, not out loud. I moved through Sunday like everything was fine, made breakfast, folded laundry, even helped Mason build a cardboard spaceship in the living room. But in the back of my mind, I was sharpening the blade. Because once you see betrayal that clearly, there's no going back. I called our lawyer first. Asked what I needed to do to dissolve a lease immediately, citing personal breach of agreement and misuse of property. He didn't ask questions. We owned the house outright. There was no reason it couldn't be done, just paperwork and notice. I told him to draw it up that afternoon. Then I opened a new folder and started gathering everything I'd need for the divorce. We had a prenup, not because I ever doubted Anna, but because my parents insisted. It was clean, direct, and heavily in my favor. Any infidelity on her part nullified her share of joint assets. All I needed was evidence. That was already done. I'd gone back Sunday night, taken photos through the glass. Time-stamped. Clear enough that no one could say it was just emotional closeness. It wasn't. It was a life she was living inside someone else's home, inside my property, with 2 people we trusted. I waited until Tuesday morning. The kids were at school. Anna was on a call in the home office. I walked in, calm, and dropped the file folder on her desk. She blinked at it. "What's this?" "Your exit," I said. "You've got until the end of the day." She stared at me. "I don't understand." "Don't play dumb, Anna. I saw you. At the house. On the couch. With them." Color drained from her face. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I kept going. "The lease is cancelled. They'll be out by Friday. You, though. You can go today. You're kicking me out. No. I'm removing a liar from my home. There's a difference. I didn't. Don't, I said, cutting her off. Don't insult me by pretending this is anything less than what it is. You didn't trip and fall into that couch. You made a second life. And you used my house to do it. Her voice cracked. What about the kids? They're staying with me. You can't just. I've already filed. Custody, full. Grounds, infidelity and moral endangerment. You want to fight it? I've got the images. I've got timestamps. I've got a paper trail of every hour you claimed you were somewhere else. She sat back in the chair, silent. I trusted you, I said. I trusted them. You made fools of all of us. Now I'm making it right. By noon, she was gone. I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream. I just packed her bags, set them outside, and locked the door behind her. By the evening, I sent notice to Nate and Lindsay, 72 hours to vacate. Breach of lease. Legal action pending if they delayed. No response. They knew better. By Friday afternoon, the house next door sat dark. No laughter. No porch light. No baby toys on the steps. Nate and Lindsay left without a word, slipping out mid-morning in 2 separate cars with nothing but bags and a few boxes. No U-Haul. No goodbye. No attempt to fight it. I didn't even watch them go. I knew they wouldn't try anything, not after what I left on their doorstep. The morning after I served them the notice, I slipped a letter under their door. It wasn't angry. Just, clear. You knew what you were doing. You used my home, my trust, my wife. Now I'm taking it all back. I attached a printed copy of the termination clause in the lease. Highlighted. Signed. Sealed. And they were gone in 48 hours. But I wasn't finished. Anna had moved into a short-term rental across town. A friend of a friend gave her a room. I didn't ask for details. I didn't care. The only reason we communicated now was through legal channels and the custody handoff schedule. And even those exchanges were brief. Cold. Exact. I didn't tell the kids the full truth, not yet. Just that Mom was living somewhere else for now, and that they'd be staying with me most of the time. Selah didn't ask much. Mason cried once, quietly, then didn't bring it up again. But I could see it in their eyes, something had shifted. That glow kids carry when the people they love still love each other, it was dimmer now. I hated her for that most of all. The neighborhood found out soon enough. Not from me, I didn't have to say anything. Word spreads when 3 families vanish from one another's lives overnight. When the couple everyone sees at school pickup suddenly walks past each other like strangers. When the perfect family implodes without a sound. People speculated. Some asked gently. Others didn't. I never denied it. When one of Lindsay's old coworkers reached out to me, anonymously, through a mutual contact, I confirmed what happened. Told them the basics. Just enough. Apparently, Lindsay had already requested to work remotely indefinitely. So I made sure the firm received the time-stamped photos. No captions. No accusations. Just facts. I did the same with Nate's employer, a family-run business where he handled client relationships and front-facing communications. He was temporarily removed from duty. Last I heard, he was looking for freelance gigs out of state. Anna. Her reputation didn't survive much longer. One of the parents at Evie's preschool recognized her. They'd seen her walking out of Nate and Lindsay's house, our house, months ago. Noticed how often she was there. Noticed the way Nate looked at her. That parent told another. And another. By the end of the month, she stopped showing up to pick the kids up. She asked if we could switch to neutral location handoffs. I agreed. It was easier than watching her pretend this was just a marriage issue. This wasn't a marriage issue. It was a fire she started in the middle of something good, and watched burn without blinking. I didn't scream. I didn't explode. But I made sure the walls came down around all three of them. And when they looked up, there was no one left standing beside them. 3 months. That's how long it took for the noise to fade. No more text messages. No more legal back and forth. No more awkward glances from neighbors. Everyone had moved on, or at least moved far enough away to pretend they had. The house next door sat empty, the "for rent" sign swaying in the wind. I hadn't listed it yet. Not because I couldn't, just because I wasn't ready to see someone else in there. The divorce finalized last week. Clean break. No alimony. Full physical custody to me, with a visitation schedule Anna barely used. She tried, at first. Showed up with books and art kits. But the kid sensed something. Selah was polite but distant. Mason clung to me tighter every time the door opened. Eventually, Anna stopped trying to make it feel normal. Maybe she finally understood that she couldn't come back to what she'd buried. And me? I was still here. Still doing school drop-offs and late-night spelling quizzes. Still burning dinners when I forgot to set the timer. Still tucking 2 small people into bed and telling them that, no matter what happened, they were safe and loved. But when the house got quiet, really quiet, I'd sometimes catch myself staring out the window. At the porch where we used to drink wine. At the kitchen where we'd planned birthday parties and family trips. At the spot on the couch where she once fell asleep mid-sentence with her head on my shoulder. It wasn't grief anymore. It was absence. Like a room that used to be full of air and now just held dust. I started walking again. Just around the block, then farther. Left my phone at home. Let my thoughts wander. At first, I walked in silence. Then I started listening to music again. Then books. Then nothing at all, just the sound of wind in the trees and the crunch of gravel under my shoes. One evening, I passed a couple on the sidewalk, laughing, brushing shoulders, completely unaware of the world around them. It didn't make me bitter. It didn't even make me sad. It just reminded me what it looked like to still believe. And I was okay with not being there yet. I didn't need to rebuild everything. I just needed to stop pretending it hadn't burned down. The kids and I made new rituals. Pancakes on Wednesdays, not Sundays. Movie nights in the blanket fort, even if the popcorn got everywhere. We filled the silence with laughter, clumsy dancing, and messy art projects taped to the fridge. The house didn't feel like our house anymore. It felt like mine and theirs. And that was enough. Sometimes I think about confronting Anna again, asking her why. Not to accuse, just to understand. But then I remember the look on her face when I handed her that file. That was the truth. That was all I'd ever get. And really, I didn't need more. She made her choice. So did they. And I made mine. I chose to live in the wreckage, sweep it up, and build something quieter, simpler, and harder to break. Not perfect. Not painless. But real. And for the first time in a long time, that's all I want.